At 64, I thought I was done with surprises. My life had settled into the quiet rhythm of gardening and crossword puzzles, a silence I had earned. Then my son, Mitchell, called, his voice tight with a shame I hadn't heard since he'd wrecked his first car. "Mom, we're in a bit of a jam. The investments, Bianca's startup, it all went south. We just need a place to land for a few months, just to get back on our feet." A few months. That's what he'd said. 3 days later, my quiet house was filled with their boxes and the scent of Bianca's expensive perfume. Bianca, my son's wife of 3 years. She was all polished angles and bright, practiced smiles, a woman who seemed to glide rather than walk. "Eliza, you are an angel for this," she'd said, kissing the air near my cheek. "We'll be out of your hair before you know it. Let me help with that." She was instantly, suffocatingly helpful. She reorganized my pantry, labeling spice jars with a precision that felt like an invasion. She'd bring me coffee in the mornings, already knowing I preferred it with a single splash of cream. She charmed my neighbors and insisted on handling the grocery shopping. "She's wonderful, isn't she?" Mitchell would say, his eyes following her as she moved, his relief palpable. He was so grateful to have his financial failures smoothed over by her efficiency that he couldn't see anything else. But I saw it. I saw the way her smile never ever reached her eyes. I saw how she'd sit in the living room reading a book, and I'd get the distinct prickling feeling of being watched. When I'd look up, her eyes would snap back to the page, but not before I caught the cold, appraising stare. It was the look of a biologist studying an insect, not a woman living with her mother-in-law. "You're so quiet, Eliza," she'd say, her voice like silk. "Always thinking. I'd love to know what's on your mind." "Just the crossword," I'd murmur. "This 7-letter word for treachery is a real stumper." Her smile tightened for just a fraction of a second. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." She was perfect. Too perfect. And in my quiet, orderly house, her perfection felt like a loaded gun. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The first time it happened, I dismissed it as a bad dream. I'd gotten up for a glass of water, my old bones aching, when I heard the faint click of the front door latch. Not a slam, but a careful, deliberate sound, engineered for silence. I crept to my bedroom window, my curtains clutched in my hand. Down on the driveway, a slim figure moved through the moonlight. It was Bianca. She was carrying a small, hard-sided suitcase, one I'd never seen among their luggage. She walked quickly, not looking back, and disappeared down the dark street. I waited by the window for 2 hours, my tea growing cold, until she returned just before dawn, empty-handed. She slipped back inside with the same ghostly quiet. The next morning, she was bright and chipper, making pancakes for Mitchell. "You look tired, Eliza," she said, sliding a plate in front of me. "Didn't you sleep well?" "I was a bit restless," I said, watching her. "I thought I heard a noise around 3. Her hand holding the coffee pot didn't even twitch. "Oh, probably just a raccoon. They're such pests this time of year." She smiled at Mitchell, and the subject was dropped. But it happened again, exactly 1 week later. A Tuesday, the same 3 a.m. departure, the same small suitcase, the same pre-dawn return. It became her ritual, and it became mine. Every Tuesday, I'd be at my window, 3 a.m. on the dot. I started a small notebook, logging the times. Left, 3:02 a.m. Returned, 5:18 a.m. Left, 3 a.m. Returned, 5:25 a.m. The pattern was precise, mechanical. It wasn't insomnia, it wasn't a late-night cigarette. People with innocent secrets don't use that kind of clockwork. People with innocent secrets don't carry suitcases into the dark. I tried to bring it up with Mitchell. "Honey, does she ever go for walks? Late at night?" He laughed, barely looking up from his laptop. "Bianca, are you kidding? She's dead to the world by 11. She works harder than anyone I know trying to get us back on track." He looked at me, his brow furrowed. "Are you feeling okay, Mom? "You've been a little jumpy." "Just an old woman's imagination," I said, but I knew I wasn't imagining it, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled my blood, that I couldn't ignore it any longer. The next Tuesday, I wouldn't just be watching. The following Tuesday, I was ready. I dressed in dark clothes and sneakers, my car keys already in my robe pocket. At 2:55 a.m., I was in my kitchen, heart pounding a dull, heavy rhythm against my ribs. At 3:01 a.m., I heard it, the soft click of the front door. I gave her a 2-minute head start, then slipped out the back door and into my old Honda. I didn't even start the engine until I'd coasted silently to the end of the driveway. I flipped my headlights off and kept 3 car lengths behind her, just a shadow tracking a ghost. She didn't walk toward the all-night diner or the 24-hour pharmacy. She took the old access road that led out of the neighborhood, the one that snaked toward the woods. My stomach tightened. The only thing out that way was Morton's Lake. It was a place for teenagers to drink and for old-timers to fish. It was isolated, dark, and deep. I parked my Honda behind a thicket of overgrown pines, my engine off. Through the trees, I could see the shimmer of the water under a pale sliver of moon. Bianca was standing at the water's edge. She looked around, a nervous bird-like motion, scanning the dark tree line. Then, apparently satisfied she was alone, she opened the suitcase. I couldn't see what she was doing, only her silhouette as she leaned over the water, making several throwing motions. Plip, plip, plip. Small, quiet sounds of things hitting the water. When she was done, she snapped the suitcase shut and started walking back, but not the way she came. She cut onto a different path, one that led deeper into the woods, away from the road. But this time, she wasn't walking. She was running. A frantic, panicked sprint, as if she was being chased. I waited, my breath held, until the sound of her crashing through the underbrush faded. Why was she running? I had to know what she'd thrown. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely operate the flashlight on my phone. I scrambled down the muddy bank to the spot where she'd been standing. The water was dark and still, reflecting the black trees. I shined the light into the shallows. Something was there, just beneath the surface, snagged on a tangle of old fishing line. It was a waterproof bag, the kind hikers use, weighted down with rocks. My heart hammered. This was it. This was what she was hiding. I rolled up my sleeve and plunged my arm into the frigid water, my fingers fumbling with the clasp. I ripped it open and dumped the contents onto the muddy bank, my light shaking. My breath caught. It was a stack of driver's licenses, not 2 or 3, at least a dozen. I picked one up. Sarah Martinez. The face was Bianca's, but with blonde hair. I picked up another, Josephine Carter. Bianca again, this time with severe, dark-rimmed glasses. Another, Rebecca Thompson. Fake names. Fake addresses, all with her face. My mind spun trying to find an innocent explanation. There wasn't one. Then my light caught something else, something metallic mixed in with the IDs. It was a small, tarnished key, a standard-issue locker key attached to a simple plastic tag. The tag was stamped with a logo I didn't recognize and a number, B412. This was different. The IDs were disposable, things you'd throw away. But a key was for keeping things. For a moment, I thought Bianca had thrown it away by mistake. But as I stood there, the cold water seeping into my sneakers, another thought took hold. What if she wanted it found? What if the woman running frantically into the woods wasn't running from something, but running to a new plan? It didn't make sense. But I knew one thing. I had to find out what this key opened. The next 2 days were a blur of frantic, secret activity. I felt like a spy in my own home. I'd wait for Bianca to leave for one of her volunteer shifts at the community center, then rush to my computer. The logo on the key tag was for Secure Space Storage, a chain I'd never heard of. Their nearest location was 40 miles away, downtown, in a grim industrial park. Getting there was a nightmare. I had to invent a reason to be gone for half a day. I told Mitchell I was meeting an old friend from college for a long lunch, a lie that felt thick and clumsy on my tongue. Bianca just smiled. "Have a wonderful time, Eliza. You deserve a break. Don't rush back on our account." The storage facility was a fortress of corrugated metal and security cameras. The man at the front desk was built like a refrigerator and looked twice as friendly. "Can I help you?" he grunted, not looking up from his magazine. I need to get into my unit. B412, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. I held up the key. He finally looked up, his eyes flat. "ID and your access code." My blood ran cold. My husband handled all that. He passed away. I found this key in his things. I don't even know what's in there. I was spinning a story, my heart pounding. He sighed, a sound of pure annoyance. "Ma'am, I can't let you in without ID and a code. Policy." I was about to give up, to walk away, but then I saw a name on his desk plaque. T. Ramirez. I remembered Bianca mentioning neighbors of ours, the Ramirezes, and how their son, Trevor, worked in security. A long shot. "You're Trevor, aren't you? Trevor Ramirez." His head snapped up. "Yeah, how'd you know?" "I'm Eliza Holloway, Mitchell's mom, from over on Maple Street. I'm Bianca's mother-in-law." His entire demeanor changed. "Oh, wow, Mrs. Holloway, Bianca's mom. Man, she's amazing. She's been helping my mom, Linda, with her new website for her baking business. For free. My mom just raves about her." "Yes," I said, my stomach twisting. "She's very generous." "Look," he said, dropping his voice, "technically, I can't let you in, but for Bianca's family, let me see what I can do. I'll have to escort you, and you can't take anything out. Just look." "Deal?" "Deal. Thank you, Trevor. You're a lifesaver." He led me through the maze of metal hallways, the air cold and smelling of dust. We stopped at B412. I slid the key in. It turned smoothly. I pulled up the heavy metal door. The locker was tiny, and it was completely empty. "Huh," Trevor said, shining his flashlight inside. "Guess your husband cleaned it out." I stepped inside, my heart sinking. This was a dead end, a waste of time. Then I saw it. Taped to the back wall, almost invisible in the gloom, was a small white envelope. My name, Eliza, was written on it in Bianca's elegant, looping script. I ripped it from the wall, my hands shaking again. Trevor was looking at his phone. "Find something?" Just an old letter," I whispered. I tore it open. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. On it were 8 words. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing for an old woman. A trap. It was a trap. The key, the locker. It was all a test. To see if I'd follow the breadcrumbs, to see if I was a threat. You okay, Mrs. Holloway? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine, Trevor," I said, crumpling the note in my fist. "Just fine. There's nothing here for me." The drive home was 40 miles of pure cold terror. She knew. Bianca knew I was following her. She knew I'd been to the lake. She'd set a trap, and I'd walked right into it, using her own network of charmed admirers to do it. She wasn't just a con artist with fake IDs. She was a planner, a manipulator, and I had just confirmed her suspicions. When I got home, the house was quiet, but it felt different. The air was charged, humming with a new, unspoken tension. I was no longer an obstacle. I was prey. My fear sharpened into something else, a cold, hard resolve. She wanted to play a game? Fine, I'd play. I started my real surveillance. I was no longer the bumbling old woman. I was the hunter. I watched Bianca's every move. I listened to her phone calls, pretending to be napping on the sofa. I saw her at the senior center, zeroing in on the frailest, loneliest members. I watched her with Mrs. Prescott, our 80-year-old neighbor, whose husband had just died. Bianca brought her casseroles, listened to her stories for hours, and held her hand. "You're just like the granddaughter I never had," Mrs. Prescott told her, her eyes wet with tears. I saw her, coincidentally, run into Mr. Jennings at the pharmacy, a widower known to be wealthy and reclusive. I watched her charm him, laughing at his old, stale jokes, until he invited her over for tea. She was building her web, and I was the only one who saw the spider. The confrontation came 3 days later. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when she glided in behind me. I hadn't even heard her. "Eliza," she said, her voice soft. I turned, soapy-handed. "You look so tired," she said, her head tilted, a perfect mask of concern. "You've been restless. I've noticed you're not sleeping." "I'm fine, dear. Just old." She smiled, but her eyes were like chips of ice. "I was just thinking. I thought I saw your car the other night, out by Morton's Lake. It's a strange place to be so late. You have to be careful, Eliza. An old woman all alone in the dark. You could fall. You could get hurt. No one would even know where to find you." The threat hung in the air between us, as sharp and clear as a shard of glass. "I don't know what you mean," I said, turning back to the sink, my hands gripped on the porcelain edge. "I was in bed all night." I felt her move closer, her perfume washing over me. "Of course you were," she whispered, her voice right by my ear. "You just make sure you stay there. It's safer." Her threat lit a fire under me. She wasn't just warning me. She was telling me my time was running out. She knew I was onto her, and she had already moved on to the next phase of her plan. The next day, I waited. I sat in my armchair, pretending to read, my ears straining, until I heard her call out, "Eliza, I'm heading to the center. Mrs. Prescott needs me to look at some insurance forms for her. I'll be back around 5. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I was up. I wasn't just looking for clues anymore. I was looking for the arsenal I knew she had to have. I went straight to their bedroom. It was immaculate, of course, not a single thing out of place. The closet was organized by color. The dresser drawers were neat. I searched under the mattress, behind the headboard, in the pockets of Mitchell's coats. Nothing. I was getting frantic, time slipping away. I had to be missing something. She was too smart to leave things in plain sight. I stood in the middle of the room, forcing myself to think like her. Where would a meticulous planner hide her secrets? Not somewhere obvious, somewhere structural. I ran my hands along the baseboards. I tapped the walls, listening for a hollow sound. Nothing. I went into their bathroom, looked inside the toilet tank. Nothing. Back in the bedroom, I stared at the closet again. It was a standard, built-in closet. But as I looked at the floor, I noticed the carpet. In the back corner, behind a rack of shoes, the nap of the carpet looked off. It was scuffed, as if something had been dragged over it repeatedly. I threw the shoes aside and pulled at the carpet. It was tacked down, but as I pulled harder, a small section came loose, revealing not wood, but a metal seam, a small, hidden floor safe. My heart leaped. It was locked. A digital keypad. Of course. I tried Mitchell's birthday, 0819. Error. I tried their anniversary, 1023. Error. I was running out of time. I looked around the room, desperate. What date mattered to her? Then I saw her planner, sitting on the nightstand. I flipped it open. She had dates circled. Mrs. P. Insurance Review, Mr. J.T. And then I saw it, circled in red 3 months ago. DC. Final. DC. Who was DC? I tried to think. The IDs. I hadn't seen a DC, but in the back of my mind, I'd been doing my own research. I'd been looking up missing persons, suspicious deaths. Diane Cooper, a wealthy widow in Phoenix who had died 6 months ago. Natural causes. Her new, devoted caregiver had inherited a small fortune. I tried the date of Diane Cooper's death, 0416. Click. The safe opened. My blood ran cold. Inside wasn't money. It was a stack of manila folders and a black leather-bound notebook. I pulled out the first folder. Diane Cooper. Inside were photos, surveillance photos, copies of her bank statements, her medical records, her will, and at the bottom, a copy of her death certificate. I grabbed another. Arthur Jennings. Not Mr. Jennings from our town, but another one, from Nevada. Same story. Photos, financials, death certificate, accidental overdose. There were 4 more files, 4 more elderly people, 4 more natural or accidental deaths, all after Bianca or Sarah or Josephine or Rebecca had entered their lives. She wasn't just a con artist. She was a serial killer. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I wanted to be sick. My son was married to this monster. Then I saw the black notebook at the bottom of the safe. I pulled it out. On the first page, in Bianca's perfect script, was a title, Current Projects. I flipped it open, and there it was, my name, Project Eliza. It was a timeline, a 6-month plan. Month 1, establish trust with M&E position as helpful. Begin subtle observation of E's routines, medication. Month 2, begin narrative of E's confusion. Suggest memory lapses to M, intercept mail. Gain access to financial statements. Month 3, intercept E at pharmacy. Offer to help organize pillbox. Begin replacing heart medication, propranolol, with placebo. Introduce low-dose warfarin to thin blood for bruising. Will support accidental fall narrative. I read on, my vision blurring. The plan was meticulous. It detailed how she would isolate me, convince Mitchell I had dementia, and then, in month 6, stage a fatal accident. A fall down the stairs, complicated by my confused state and the medication she'd been feeding me. Month 6, finalize. E's life insurance policy, $200K, and house equity transfers to M as spouse. I gain joint control. M will be grieving, pliable. Consolidate assets, and move on. I looked at the calendar. We were at the end of month 2. She was already setting the stage, telling Mitchell I was jumpy and forgetful. My hand was shaking so violently I could barely hold my phone, but I knew I had to. I pulled it out of my pocket, my fingers fumbling with the camera. I photographed every single page, the files, the death certificates, and every single horrifying page of Project Eliza. I had her. The proof was right here, glowing on my phone screen. I had her. I shoved the files and the notebook back into the safe, my movements clumsy with adrenaline and terror. I locked it, pushed the carpet back into place, and kicked the shoes back on top. I looked around the room. Everything was exactly as I'd found it. I stumbled back to my own room, collapsing into my armchair, my phone clutched in my hand. The evidence. It was all there. I just had to show Mitchell. He couldn't deny this. He couldn't deny photos of her own handwriting. I heard her car pull into the driveway. My body went rigid. I shoved my phone deep into my robe pocket. Be normal. Be the confused old woman. A few minutes later, she appeared in my doorway, her face a mask of sunny perfection. Eliza, I'm home. How was your afternoon? Quiet, dear, I managed, my voice sounding strained. Just reading. She smiled. That's good. She stepped into the room, looking around, her eyes scanning. I'm so glad you're home. I just had the worst thing happen. My phone battery completely died right in the middle of my call with Mrs. Prescott's insurance. It's an older model. Just terrible. She sighed dramatically. I know this is a huge imposition, but could I possibly borrow your phone for just 2 minutes? I need to confirm her new policy number before their office closes. I promise I'll be quick. I froze. My phone, the one in my pocket, the one with all the pictures. Oh, I said. I'm not sure where it is. Maybe in the kitchen. No, it's right there, she said, her voice still light, pointing at the telltale bulge in my robe pocket. I can see it. Please, Eliza. It's really an emergency for poor Mrs. Prescott. I was trapped. If I refused, she'd know. She'd know I had something to hide. But if I gave it to her? Slowly, my hand trembling, I pulled the phone out. She smiled, a bright, grateful flash of teeth, and took it from me. "You're a lifesaver. I'll be right back." She turned and walked into the hallway, already dialing. I sat there, my blood like ice, listening to her cheerful, professional voice. "Yes, hello, this is Bianca Holloway calling on behalf of Mrs. Prescott. Yes, I'll hold." It was the longest 2 minutes of my life. My skin crawled. I could hear her tapping on the screen. Was she just waiting? Or was she... She came back into the room, her smile firmly in place. "All set. Thank you so much." She handed the phone back to me. "You're a doll. Now I'm going to start dinner. Mitchell will be home soon." And just like that, she was gone. I waited until I heard her chopping vegetables in the kitchen. With a dreadful, sinking feeling, I unlocked my phone. I went to my photo gallery. It was empty. No photos or videos. She'd wiped it. All of it. The files, the notebook. Project Eliza. Every last shred of my proof was gone. She had been one step ahead of me the entire time. She'd known I was in her room. The dead battery was a lie. The whole thing was a calculated move to disarm me. I was back at square one. But now, she knew exactly what I'd found, and I knew she was done playing games. The panic was so cold and total, it almost paralyzed me. I had nothing. No photos, no files, no proof. Just the word of a confused old woman against a brilliant, flawless predator. I couldn't wait. I had to tell Mitchell. I had to make him believe me, evidence or no evidence. When he walked in the door, I grabbed him by the arm, pulling him into the living room before he could even kiss his wife. "Mom, what is it? You look pale." "Mitchell, we have to talk now before she comes in here." I laid it all out. The 3 a.m. trips, Morton's Lake, the fake IDs, the storage locker trap, and finally, the safe. The files on dead elderly people, the notebook, Project Eliza. "She has a plan, Mitchell, a 6-month plan to kill me. She's been documenting it. She's going to make it look like an accident." He just stared at me. His face wasn't horrified. It wasn't concerned. It was a mask of pity and deep, crushing disappointment. "Mom, stop," he said, his voice quiet. "Just stop. No, you don't understand. She's a serial killer. She's murdered at least 5 people. That's enough," he suddenly yelled, his voice cracking. "Do you hear yourself? Do you have any idea how insane you sound? I had pictures, Mitchell. I had proof. She borrowed my phone and she deleted them, just now." He ran his hands through his hair, pacing the room. "Oh God, she deleted them, of course she did. Mom, listen to yourself. You're accusing my wife of being a serial killer, and your proof is a story about magic disappearing photos? It's not a story. It's the truth." I was crying now, tears of sheer, helpless rage. "Why would I make this up? Why would I do this?" "I don't know," he shot back. "Maybe because you've never liked her. Maybe because you hate that I needed your help. Maybe you're just not well, Mom. Bianca's been worried about you. She said you've been confused, forgetful. And God, I didn't want to believe her, but this..." He gestured to me, his face a mix of anger and pain. "This is not my mother. My mother doesn't invent monstrous lies about the people I love." He was convinced. She'd already won. She had poisoned him against me so perfectly that my desperate truth sounded exactly like the paranoid delusions she'd been predicting. The living room door opened. Bianca stood there, a wooden spoon in her hand, her face a perfect portrait of anxious concern. Is everything all right?" I heard shouting. Mitchell let out a long, exhausted breath. "It's Mom. She's not well, B." Bianca rushed to my side, her eyes wide and filled with a sympathy that made me want to scream. "Oh, Eliza," she said, her voice a soft coo. "What's wrong? What happened?" "She's been telling me stories," Mitchell said, unable to even look at me. "Stories about you, that you go to the lake at 3 a.m., that you have a safe full of murder files, that you're planning to hurt her." Bianca's hand flew to her mouth, and her eyes filled with what looked like genuine, devastating tears. "Oh no, oh Eliza, it's worse than I thought." She turned to Mitchell, her voice breaking. "Mitchell, honey, I didn't want to worry you, but she's been like this for weeks. The confusion, the accusations. She's been following me, asking the neighbors strange questions about me. I think it's paranoia. It's classic early-stage dementia." "No!" I yelled, pulling away from her. "She's lying. She's the one who's sick. She's a murderer." My own son flinched. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. "It's okay, Eliza," Bianca said soothingly, as if talking to a frightened child. "I know this is scary for you. We're not mad. We just want to get you some help." She looked at Mitchell, her face a mask of loving concern. "Honey, I think it's time we called Dr. Montgomery. We need to get her an assessment just to be safe. I'll handle it. You just sit with her." She glided out of the room, leaving me alone with my son, who stared at the floor, his face grim. The trap had snapped shut. I wasn't just the crazy old woman anymore. I was the patient, and she was now my concerned, loving caregiver. I was running out of time. They were going to have me committed, drugged, or both. And once I was officially labeled incompetent, Bianca could do whatever she wanted. I had one last chance, one person who might listen. The next morning, I told Mitchell I was going to the grocery store. The look he gave me was one of deep suspicion, as if I might get lost on the way. "Okay, Mom, call me if you need anything." I didn't go to the store. I drove straight to the police station. The woman at the front desk looked bored until I said the word murder. That got me into a small gray interview room with a woman who looked as tired as I felt. Her nameplate read, Detective Sandra Wallace. "So, Mrs. Holloway," she said, opening a notepad, "you believe your daughter-in-law is a serial killer?" Her tone was polite, but the skepticism was a mile thick. I didn't care. I told her everything. From the first 3 a.m. trip to the forged will I was sure must exist. I told her about the IDs, the locker trap, the files in the safe, and the Project Eliza notebook. I told her how Bianca had deleted the photos. She listened patiently, taking notes. When I was finished, she tapped her pen on the pad for a long moment. "Mrs. Holloway, Eliza, these are extraordinary accusations." "I know how it sounds," I said, leaning forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "I know she's painted me as confused, but you have to believe me. You can check the names. Diane Cooper, from Phoenix. Arthur Jennings, from Nevada. Check their death certificates. Check who cared for them." "And what do you think we'll find?" Detective Wallace asked. "That they all died of natural causes or accidents after being befriended by a woman who looks just like her? Eliza, I've been a cop for 20 years. That's circumstantial at best. But the safe, the files you don't have, the photos she magically deleted, the notebook you can't produce. Do you see my problem? I can't get a warrant for a woman's home based on this. Bianca Holloway has a spotless record in this town. She volunteers. Everyone loves her. That's how she does it," I said, my voice rising in desperation. "She charms everyone." "Eliza," the detective said, her voice softening, "I can see you are genuinely terrified, but my hands are tied. Without one piece of physical, concrete evidence, I have nothing." She stood up. The interview was over. "But," she said, pulling a card from her pocket, "you call me if anything else happens, anything at all. You see her with that suitcase again, you call me, you find one thing she can't explain. You call this number, day or night, okay?" I took the card. It felt as heavy as a tombstone. "She's going to kill me," I whispered, "and you're not going to do anything until it's too late." "Get me the evidence, Eliza," Wallace said, her eyes hard, "and I'll bury her under the jail." I drove home, defeated. I was on my own. The police wouldn't help. My son thought I was insane, and Bianca knew I'd tried to go to the cops. How? I didn't know, but I was sure she did. The walls of my own home felt like they were closing in. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my armchair, fully dressed, watching the clock. It was Monday. Not her usual night. But my gut told me the schedule had changed. The confrontation with Mitchell, the trip to the police. She would be accelerating her plan. At 2:17 a.m., I heard it. The soft click of the front door. I was at the window in a second. Bianca. She was getting into her car, not walking, and she wasn't carrying the small suitcase. She was carrying a long, rolled-up object, a new, larger bag. My blood turned to ice. This was it. I didn't even bother with stealth. I ran to my Honda and started the engine, peeling out of the driveway, my headlights blazing. I'd follow her, and I'd call Detective Wallace the second I saw her do anything. She drove fast, taking the route to Morton's Lake. I stayed on her tail. She knew I was following her. I didn't care. She parked her car at the edge of the access road and got out, dragging the heavy bag and the rolled object from her trunk. She marched toward the water. I parked behind her, grabbed my phone, and ran after her, dialing Wallace's number. I burst through the trees into the clearing by the lake, and I froze. Bianca wasn't alone. A tall, thin man was with her. He had a hard, brutal face I'd never seen before. Daniel. It had to be. They weren't dumping anything. They had unrolled the object. It was a large, heavy-duty plastic tarp, spread out on the ground near the water's edge. The man was opening the bag. It was full of tools, a shovel, quicklime, rope. They were preparing a kill site, a grave. For me. Bianca looked up and her eyes met mine across the moonlit clearing. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look angry. She smiled. "Right on time, Eliza," she said. "Daniel, it seems our guest of honor has arrived." The man, Daniel, dropped the shovel and started walking toward me. He was big, and he moved with a fast, predatory grace. "Mrs. Holloway," my phone squawked. It was Detective Wallace. "What's going on?" "She's at the lake," I screamed into the phone. "Morton's Lake. She's not alone. She has a man. They have a tarp. They're going to kill me." "Get out of there, Eliza. We're on our way." Daniel lunged for me. I threw my phone at his face and turned and ran. I crashed through the underbrush, branches whipping my face, my lungs burning. I was 64. I was not a runner. He was right behind me. I could hear him swearing, his heavy footsteps snapping twigs just yards away. "You can't run from me, you old witch!" he roared. I burst onto the access road and scrambled for my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't find the lock. His hand slammed onto the car window right next to my head. I screamed as he grabbed the door handle and yanked. It was locked. I finally jammed the key in the ignition and twisted. The engine roared to life. I slammed the car into reverse, not caring where I was going, and hit the gas. The car shot backward, clipping Daniel in the leg. He yelled in pain and stumbled, giving me the second I needed. I threw the car into drive and floored it, fishtailing on the gravel road, my headlights cutting through the darkness. I looked in my rearview mirror. Bianca and Daniel were standing in the road, watching me go. Bianca wasn't even breathing hard. She was just standing there, her arms crossed, as if this was all just a minor inconvenience. I didn't stop driving until I was in my own garage, the door rattling shut behind me, sealing me in the dark. I sat there, hyperventilating, my entire body shaking. They were coming. They hadn't chased me. Why? Because they didn't need to. They knew where I lived. I stumbled into the house, locking the deadbolt, my mind racing. I'd lost my phone. Wallace was on her way, but how long would it take? 10 minutes? 15? Bianca and Daniel would be here before then. I was trapped. I was going to die here, in my own home. Then I remembered. The notebook. Project Eliza. It wasn't just about killing me. It was about the money. Consolidate assets and move on. My will. I ran to my study, to the old metal filing cabinet where I kept my important papers. I ripped open the personal drawer and pulled out the thick envelope labeled Last Will and Testament. I tore it open. It was simple. Just as I'd written it 5 years ago, everything split 50-50 between Mitchell and my granddaughter. I flipped to the last page, my signature, the signatures of my 2 witnesses, my neighbors. Everything looked... Wait. I squinted, grabbing my reading glasses. The ink, my signature, was in blue. The witnesses, their signatures were in black. And the date? It was dated 2 weeks ago. I hadn't looked at this will in 5 years. This wasn't my will. It was a forgery. I read the text again, my blood running colder than the lake water. I leave my entire estate, including my home at 412 Maple Street and my life insurance policy, number 45882-9B, to my beloved son Mitchell Holloway and his devoted wife Bianca Holloway, to be shared jointly. If I died, Mitchell wouldn't just inherit. She would. She would own half of my house. She would get $100,000 in cash. She'd been in my house, in my study, in my private files. She'd replaced my will with a perfect notarized forgery. All she needed now was for me to die. I heard a car door slam outside. They were here. My heart leaped into my throat. They were on the porch. I had maybe 30 seconds. I shoved the forged will back into the envelope. Think, Eliza, think. You can't run. You can't hide. So you have to fight. I ran to the kitchen. My phone was gone, but I had a backup plan. Years ago, I'd bought a small digital recorder to tape family stories. I kept it in the junk drawer. I grabbed it, slammed new batteries in, and hit record. I shoved it deep into my robe pocket. Then I put the kettle on. I grabbed a mug. I was going to look like the terrified old woman they expected to find. The front door opened. I heard their soft footsteps in the hall. Mitchell was a heavy sleeper. He wouldn't even hear this. Bianca and Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway. Daniel was rubbing his leg where I'd hit him, his face a mask of cold fury. Bianca looked calm, almost bored. "Eliza," she said, her voice no longer holding any false sweetness, "you are causing us a significant amount of trouble." What do you want?" I said, my voice trembling, clutching my mug. It wasn't all an act. "What do we want?" Daniel sneered. "We want you to stop being a problem. Permanently." Bianca held up a hand, silencing him. She walked toward me, her eyes cold. "We need to talk, Eliza, about what you saw at the lake." I don't know what you mean," I stammered, backing away. I couldn't sleep." "Stop," she said. "Just stop. The game is over. You've been following me for weeks. You snooped in my room. You went to the police. You've been a very, very bad mother-in-law." She sat down at the kitchen table, as casual as if she were here for breakfast. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" I gripped my mug, my knuckles white. The digital recorder was running, a faint red light glowing in my pocket. I just needed to keep her talking. I still don't understand," I whispered. "Fine," Bianca sighed, rolling her eyes. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small amber-colored pill bottle. My name was on it, my heart medication. "These are your pills, Eliza," she said, shaking them. "Did you know that if you take too many, it just stops your heart? A very peaceful way to go, just like falling asleep." She unscrewed the cap and poured a dozen pills into her palm. "Of course, at your age, with your confusion, no one will be surprised. A tragic accidental overdose. Poor Mitchell will be devastated." She smiled. "But at least he'll have me to comfort him and to help him manage all that messy inheritance." "What about him?" I asked, nodding at Daniel, who was leaning against the doorframe like a vulture. Bianca paused, surprised. "What about him?" "Your partner. The one who helps you dispose of the evidence. The one who digs the graves." For the first time since I'd met her, Bianca looked genuinely impressed. She let out a small, sharp laugh. "You really have been busy, haven't you?" "Yes, Daniel helps with the physical aspects of my work. He's very good at making problems disappear." "Like Diane Cooper," I said, my voice shaking. "Like Arthur Jennings? Like those other 4 people?" Her smile widened. "Oh, you found the files. I was wondering." "Yes, just like them. They served their purpose, just like you're about to serve yours." She stood up and moved around the table, backing me into the corner. Daniel moved to block the other doorway. I was trapped. "The difference is, Eliza," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "I actually started to like you, so I'm going to make this quick." She grabbed my arm with one hand, her grip like a steel vise. With the other, she brought the handful of pills toward my face. "Before you do that," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "you should know that Detective Wallace has been listening to this entire conversation." Bianca froze. Her hand stopped, an inch from my mouth. What did you say?" I called her when I left the lake. I dropped my phone, but the line stayed open. She's been listening to every word. "She heard you confess, Bianca. She heard everything." Bianca's face went white, then it flushed a deep, blotchy red. "You bitch!" "It's a lie," Daniel snarled, moving toward me. "She's bluffing. Finish it." "Is she?" a new voice said. We all turned. Detective Sandra Wallace was standing in the hallway, her service weapon drawn and leveled at Daniel's chest. 2 uniformed officers were flanking her, their own guns pointed at Bianca. "We heard the entire confession, Bianca," Wallace said, her voice ringing with cold authority. "The boasting about Diane Cooper, the threat to Mrs. Holloway. It was all very clear." Bianca stared at the gun, then at me. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. She lunged, not at Wallace, but at me. "I'll kill you myself," she shrieked. She never got the chance. The kettle on the stove, which I had turned on minutes before, let out a piercing whistle. It was boiling. As Bianca came at me, I grabbed the hot kettle and threw its entire contents directly into her face. She screamed, a horrible, scalding sound, and stumbled backward, clutching her blistering skin. The officers were on her in a second, slamming her to the floor. Daniel had already put his hands up, his face pale with shock. The kitchen door burst open. Mitchell stood there, his hair wild from sleep, his eyes wide with confusion and terror. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" He took in the scene, his wife screaming and writhing on the floor as an officer handcuffed her. A strange, large man pressed against the wall. 3 cops, and me, standing by the stove, holding an empty kettle, my robe dripping with water. "Your wife," I said, my voice shaking, "just confessed to multiple murders after she tried to force-feed me an overdose of my heart medication." "What, Mom? That's Mr. Holloway," Detective Wallace said, holstering her weapon. "This is Detective Wallace. We have a full recording of your wife's confession. She and her partner were just discussing the murders of Diane Cooper and at least 4 others. Your mother is not confused. She's a victim and a hero." Mitchell stared at Bianca, who had stopped screaming and was now just sobbing. Her mask of perfection melted away, revealing the monster underneath. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His face crumpled. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Mom, oh, God, what did I do?" As the officers hauled a spitting, cursing Bianca to her feet, she locked eyes with me one last time. "This isn't over," she hissed through her scalded lips. "You have no idea what you've done." "Actually, it is over," Wallace said, pulling the small digital recorder from my pocket. "And thanks to Mrs. Holloway, we have this too, just in case." They took them away. The house was suddenly, violently quiet, filled only with the sound of Mitchell's ragged sobs. He'd collapsed at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. I called you crazy. I left you alone with her. I walked over and put my arms around my son. I held him as he cried, the full weight of his wife's betrayal crashing down on him. It's okay, I said, rubbing his back. She was good. She fooled everyone. That was her gift. Detective Wallace stayed behind, taking my final statement. Her partner, Daniel, is singing like a canary, she said, sipping the coffee I'd made her. He's terrified. He was just the muscle. He said Bianca was the brain, the planner. He said they've been at this for 7 years. He thinks the real victim count is closer to 12. She shook her head, looking at me with a new respect. If you hadn't followed her, if you hadn't pushed, she would have killed you and she would have moved on to Mrs. Prescott. You saved more than just your own life tonight, Eliza. I couldn't let her win, I said, my hands finally starting to stop shaking. I couldn't let her take my home and my son. 3 months later, I sat in the witness box. I told my story. This time, everyone listened. The courtroom was packed with the families of Bianca's other victims, the families of Diane Cooper, Arthur Jennings, and so many others. Bianca's face, now scarred from the burns, was a cold, indifferent mask. She showed no remorse. She stared at me during my entire testimony, her eyes dead. The jury didn't need long. They were out for less than an hour. Guilty. On all counts. Multiple life sentences. No possibility of parole. Daniel, in exchange for his full confession and testimony, got 25 years. When it was over, Mitchell and I walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunlight. He was still healing. We both were. But he held my hand and his grip was strong. "Let's go home, Mom," he said. Sometimes, I still wake up at 3 a.m. The old house is silent, and for a half second my heart seizes, listening for the soft click of the front door. But then I breathe. It's over. The house is just a house again. It's my house. The police drained Morton's Lake. They found items belonging to over a dozen victims, providing closure to families who had spent years wondering. Mrs. Prescott and Mr. Jennings both sent me cards. They'd had no idea how close they'd come. Mitchell is better. He's in therapy. He's working again, a simple construction job, and he's slowly forgiving himself. Our relationship is different, forged in a fire I wouldn't wish on anyone, but it's stronger. I've learned that being 64 doesn't mean you're invisible or weak or finished. It means you've seen enough of the world to know when something is truly wrong. The deadliest predators aren't the ones with fangs. They're the ones with the sweetest smiles, the most helpful hands. They count on you being too polite, too trusting, or too old to fight back. They never counted on me, and I'm still here. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.